The sequence begins with a jarring, high-contrast image of military precision invading a space of local corruption. The heavy, metallic slam of the Ironwood precinct's front door echoing is cut short by the shrill, persistent scream of the desk sergeant's landline. Officer Whitmore, still smirking at Sarah's tears, reaches for the receiver, only to have the entire building shudder as a flashbang detonates in the parking lot. A voice, distorted by a secure tactical line but vibrating with a father's cold, lethal fury, erupts from the speaker before Whitmore can even say hello. This is Colonel David Raymond of the United States Delta Force. You are currently holding a Tier 1 national asset. If my daughter is not standing on that curb unharmed in 90 seconds, the next sound you hear won't be a phone call, it will be the kinetic removal of your roof. Sarah Raymond is a master of the unobserved life. She navigates the halls of her law school like a ghost, favoring oversized sweaters, second-hand sedans, and a demeanor so soft it's often mistaken for weakness. She has spent her life learning to weaponize the assumptions of men like Whitmore. While her classmates spend their mornings at coffee shops, Sarah spends hers in the gym, practicing the breath control techniques her father taught her to survive behind enemy lines. This cross-country drive was meant to be her final test of independence, a quiet journey through the heartland. But as the predatory glow of a patrol car fills her mirror on the outskirts of Ironwood, Sarah doesn't panic. She simply activates the beacon hidden in her watch and prepares to play the role they expect, the victim who isn't actually a victim at all. Deep within the windowless confines of a secure briefing room at Fort Bragg, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the hum of high-end encryption servers. Colonel David Raymond stood at the head of a mahogany table, his silhouette cast long and sharp against a digital map of the world. His eyes, the color of gunmetal, didn't move as he detailed the extraction of a deep-cover operative in a hostile territory. To the men in that room he was a legend, a ghost who moved mountains with a whisper. He was the commander of Delta Force, a man who had forgotten more about warfare than most generals would ever learn. He lived in the shadows, a sentinel of a nation, yet his thoughts often strayed to the one light he allowed in his world, Sarah. 300 miles away, Sarah was performing a different kind of precision drill. She folded her sweaters into neat, compressed rectangles, tucking a series of law textbooks into her duffel bag. She was heading to a prestigious law seminar, a journey she insisted on making alone. She had spent 23 years under the umbrella of David's protection, and this cross-country drive was her silent declaration of sovereignty. She didn't carry a weapon, she carried a sharp mind and the internal discipline of a Raymond. As she zipped her bag, she caught her reflection in the mirror, a soft-featured law student in an oversized hoodie. It was a perfect disguise. If you've ever felt the need to step out from a shadow and prove your own strength, you might find a quiet kinship with Sarah's journey, perhaps enough to subscribe and witness how she holds her ground when that shadow is forcibly pulled back. The sun was dipping below the horizon, bleeding a bruised purple across the cornfields of the Midwest, when the first flicker of red and blue appeared in Sarah's rearview mirror. She pulled her second-hand sedan onto the gravel shoulder of Route 9, the dust from the parched earth swirling around her tires. As she rolled down her window, the humid evening air was replaced by the looming, aggressive presence of Officer Ryan Whitmore. He didn't ask for license and registration. He kicked her front tire and leaned his heavy frame against her door, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting her calm, dark eyes. Out-of-state plates and a law school sticker, Whitmore drawled, his hand resting conspicuously on his sidearm. You're a long way from the ivory tower, sweetheart. You look a little nervous. Maybe you're carrying something you shouldn't be? Sarah didn't argue. She didn't mention her father. She maintained the submissive, slightly trembling persona she had practiced. But inside, she was already scanning the environment, the lack of a body cam on Whitmore's vest, the way his partner stayed by the cruiser, eyes darting toward the empty road. When Whitmore reached through the window to grab her duffel bag without a word of consent, the routine stop had officially crossed into a predator's hunt. The Ironwood precinct was a relic of a building, smelling of wet concrete and old cigarette smoke. Inside, the atmosphere was jubilant, but with a predatory edge. Whitmore had Sarah handcuffed to a cold metal bench in the center of the squad room, her law books scattered across a desk like spoils of war. He flipped through her constitutional law text, mocking the highlighted passages with a guttural laugh that was joined by 3 other officers lounging nearby. They saw a privileged girl, someone they could break to remind themselves they still ran this forgotten corner of the world. "Look at this, boys," Whitmore shouted, tearing a page from her book and dropping it into a trash can. "She thinks she has rights in Ironwood. She's crying because she thinks someone is coming to help her. Sarah let the tears fall, her shoulders shaking with simulated sobs. It was the ultimate camouflage. She watched through the veil of her hair as they tossed her duffel bag into the corner, laughing at her silence. They were so blinded by their own cruelty that they didn't notice the way she sat, feet flat, weight centered, ready for the moment the laughter would have to stop. Whitmore's frustration peaked when Sarah refused to give him the passcode to her smartphone. With a sneer, he dropped the device onto the concrete floor and ground his heel into the glass, the screen spider webbing into darkness. "No calls for you, honey. You're off the grid now," he barked, shoving her toward a holding cell. He thought he had destroyed her link to the world, but he had merely removed the outer shell. Inside the smashed chassis, a specialized military-grade black box transmitter, triggered by the sudden catastrophic pressure, sparked to life. A high-frequency burst, encrypted with a 256-bit rotating key, shot out of the precinct, bouncing off a low-orbit satellite before diving into a secure terminal at the Pentagon. In the cell, Sarah leaned her head against the cold bars, her breathing synchronized and slow. She wasn't praying, she was timing the response. She knew that every second Whitmore spent laughing brought him closer to a reckoning he couldn't possibly imagine. It's a haunting realization when you see a bully think they've won, unaware they've just activated their own destruction. It makes you wonder in the comments below if people like Whitmore ever truly understand the gravity of who they choose to target. The meeting at the Pentagon was interrupted by a silent, crimson pulse on the tablet resting in front of Colonel David Raymond. He didn't interrupt the Secretary of Defense's speech. He simply stood up, his chair scraping softly against the floor. His staff knew that look. It was the expression he wore before the Bin Laden raid, a terrifying, absolute stillness. He walked out of the room and into the secure communications hub, where a technician pointed to a blinking dot on a map of Ironwood. "It's her emergency beacon, sir. Signal indicates device destruction and high-stress activation." David Raymond didn't hesitate. He didn't file a request for jurisdiction or call the local governor. He picked up the secure line to the Night Stalker's hangar. "This is Raymond. Execute Operation Angel Shield. Coordinates locked. I want a full Tier 1 extraction team in the air in 5 minutes. Authorized use of force, total." He stood in the center of the hub, watching the satellite feed of the Ironwood precinct. To the world he was a colonel. To the men he just mobilized he was a god of war, and his daughter was the only thing he had left to lose. In the dim light of the precinct, Whitmore's smirks had turned into something more sinister. He realized that Sarah's lack of a social media footprint and her silence meant she was a clean target, someone he could make disappear without an immediate paper trail. He unlocked her cell, a heavy zip tie in his hand. "Change of plans, Sarah. We're going for a drive to the old quarry. You're going to be an unsolved disappearance in our books. It's a shame, really. You had a bright future." He hauled her out of the cell, his grip bruising her arm. Sarah felt the cold bite of the zip tie on her wrists, but she didn't fight back yet. She needed to stay in the building. She looked at the clock on the wall, 85 minutes since the beacon went live. She looked Whitmore in the eye and for the first time, her voice was steady, devoid of the tears she had shed earlier. "You should check your radar, officer. You're about to have a very bad night." Whitmore just laughed, unaware that the air pressure in the room was already beginning to change. The laughter was cut short by a sound that didn't belong in a rural town, a low-frequency, chest-thumping thrum that vibrated the very marrow of their bones. Whitmore froze, his hand on Sarah's shoulder. Then the windows of the precinct imploded inward. The sound of 2 MH-6M little birds and a black hawk hovering 50 feet above the roof drowned out the screams of the officers. Suddenly the front doors of the precinct were gone, vaporized by a kinetic breaching charge that sent a wave of dust and heat through the squad room. Ropes dropped through the shattered skylights. Before Whitmore could even draw his weapon, the room was filled with shadows moving with terrifying, silent speed. High-intensity tactical lights blinded the local cops, and the rhythmic pop-pop of suppressed rifles took out the precinct's power and communication racks. Laser sights, dozens of them, crisscrossed the room, finally settling into a tight cluster on Officer Whitmore's forehead. He was surrounded by the most elite soldiers on the planet, and he was holding a colonel's daughter with a zip tie. The smoke began to clear as David Raymond stepped through the ruined doorway, his combat boots crunching on the glass. He didn't look like a colonel in a suit anymore. He was in full tactical gear, his face smeared with char, and 416 Hong Kong dollars held in a relaxed but lethal low-ready position. He ignored the whimpering officer's face down on the floor. His eyes moved directly to Sarah. An operator stepped forward, slicing the zip ties off her wrists with a combat knife. Sarah stood up, rubbing her wrists, her face finally reflecting the cold, hard discipline of her upbringing. She didn't hug her father, she simply nodded. 92 minutes, Dad. You're getting slow. A ghost of a smile touched David's lips before his eyes turned back to Whitmore, who was curled in a ball, his hands over his head. David walked over and placed the hot muzzle of his rifle against the man's ear. You laughed at her tears, David whispered, the sound more terrifying than the helicopters outside. Now let's see if you can make me laugh. David Raymond didn't kill Whitmore. He had something much more permanent in mind. He pulled a satellite phone from his vest and tossed it onto the floor in front of the shaking officer. Call your boss. Call Mayor Henderson. Tell him the Ironwood project is over. Tell him the United States Army has declared this precinct a hostile insurgent cell. Whitmore's hands shook so violently he could barely dial. On the other end of the line, the mayor's arrogant voice was cut short as David took the phone back. Mayor Henderson, David said, his voice echoing in the ruined room. Every digital record in your office, every bribe you took from the quarry, and every phone call you made to Whitmore has been intercepted by my signals team. We aren't here to arrest you. We are here to erase you. Behind him, FBI agents who had been flown in on the Black Hawk began crating every computer and file cabinet in the building. The Ironwood corruption wasn't just being exposed, it was being dismantled with military efficiency. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, the empire of bullies was nothing but a pile of glass and broken dreams. The first light of dawn hit the Ironwood precinct sign as it dangled from a single chain. Sarah and David stood on the cracked concrete steps, the silence of the morning punctuated only by the distant, departing thrum of the helicopters. The town was waking up to a different world, one where the predators were in chains and the invisible girl was the one who had brought the lightning. David handed Sarah a fresh duffel bag from the back of an SUV. The seminar starts in 3 hours. You can still make it. Sarah took the bag, looking at the ruin behind them, then back at her father. She had her independence, but she also knew now that she was part of something larger, a legacy of justice that moved in the dark. I'll take the SUV, Dad. My car's seen better days. David nodded, watching her drive away with the same quiet pride he felt after a successful mission. He turned back to the remaining federal agents, his shadow long and imposing against the rising sun. Ironwood was under new management, and the world had learned a very simple lesson: never mistake silence for weakness. As we look at the rising sun on a town finally free, we thank you for staying with us through every shadow and every strike, and if this journey meant something to you, we invite you to share the resonance of Sarah's victory.